if you are a turkey hunter, if you want to start turkey hunting, I've got a good one for you today. If you have ever wanted to become a more successful turkey hunter, if you've ever wanted to understand birds better, I've got an episode for you today that is going to help you go from trying to find birds to predicting where the birds will be and why. It is a very good episode. I'm joined by Mr. Mike Chamberlain, Dr. Mike Chamberlain, who has spent more than 3 decades studying the iconic game bird, balancing his role as a leading academic with his passion as a hunter. He was named the NWTF Distinguished Professor at the University of Georgia, the nation's very first endowed position devoted solely to wild turkey research. Here's what Mike's going to do. He is going to walk you through. If you have never turkey hunted before, he's going to help you understand what sort of habitat that these turkeys want to be in. He's also going to share with you maybe some things, no matter how much you've turkey hunted, no matter how dedicated of a turkey hunter you are, he's going to share some things that might just blow your mind about turkey habitat, the way they relocate, the way they use the habitat. Some birds traveling more than 80 miles. It is mind-blowingly informational. So if you've never turkey hunted before, he's going to set you on the right path in order to find birds. If you are a dedicated turkey hunter, he is going to help you better understand your habitat and give you tips and tricks to better improve your habitat. Guys, this entire series is brought to you by my good friends over at Blocker Outdoors. Phenomenal turkey hunting gear at a phenomenal price. Go check out Blocker Outdoors as you're gearing up for this spring and you're looking to get that new vest, the new face mask, the new pants or shirt you might need. Go check out Blocker Outdoors. And don't forget, we currently have a giveaway for a free guided turkey hunt here in Kansas with Skeen Outfitters. We're also going to give you $300 to spend on the Blocker website. You can go check out all their stuff, figure out what you want, and we'll get you an order placed. We're also going to send you a pack of the brand new Dirty Birds from G5, an incredible new turkey broadhead that they did in collaboration with Chris B. We're going to send you the broadheads, the camo, and bring you out on a guided turkey hunt here in Kansas. All you have to do is make sure and subscribe to the Typical Sportsman podcast on either Spotify or YouTube. So make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on one of those 2 channels, and we are going to give away a guided turkey hunt. Let's jump in with Mr. Mike Chamberlain and learn how to better understand a turkey's habitat.
For the true sportsman, it's more than a pastime. It's a way of life. Embrace the lifestyle of hunting, fishing, and the thrill of the wild. Live the life. Be typical.
Let me share a little bit about why I am so passionate about Mountain Ops. Yeah, they make incredible supplements to help me in my everyday life, on the mountain, in the gym. Great supplements. However, they also support my rights as a hunter. They're also Christian owned, which is something that I value a ton. And then third, through Operation Conquer Hunger, for every order that's placed on mountainops.com, they're providing a healthy meal to a family in need. Guys, if you use supplements at all, I would highly encourage you to look at not only the supplements that a company is pushing out, but also what that company represents. So guys, go check out mountainops.com because it's a company that I can not only support because they make great products, but because they support the same things that I support. They support me as a hunter as well. So guys, go to mountainops.com, use code TYPICAL. That's going to save you a lot on your order, and you're still going to provide a meal for somebody who's in need of a healthy meal. Mountainops.com, discount code TYPICAL. Go check them out today. My favorite product by far is Ignite. I use it every single day. Before I podcast, before I sit down to work, before I go to the gym, I use it all the time. I use it on the mountain religiously. Ignite is my favorite product by far. However, they have a full line of supplements to help you conquer the mountain, conquer the day, conquer work, whatever you're looking to do. they've got something for you. Mountainops.com, discount code typical. Dr. Michael Chamberlain, before we jump in, man, which I'm excited about today, I think it'll be a very beneficial episode for those just starting turkey hunting, but also for those diehard turkey hunters to maybe just better understand a turkey and where they live, why they live there, why they're doing what they're doing. But before we jump into all of that, give us an introduction to yourself, my friend.
Yeah, so I'm Mike Chamberlain. I'm a faculty member at the University of Georgia. I do applied field research on all kinds of critters, but wild turkey research has pretty much dominated my career since I was a graduate student. So I've actually been conducting research on wild turkeys for over 30 years now. It's a true passion of mine.
And I was told that you are the first. Help me with the verbiage here. The first commissioned biologist for the NWTF or something along those lines.
Yeah, no. So my faculty position at the University of Georgia is now endowed by an endowment that was created by NWTF, and it's the first of that type of position to ever exist. And what that means is that NWTF contributed enough monies to endow my position so that when I retire, the University of Georgia will have to replace me with someone who has the demonstrated record of conducting research on wild turkeys. And so there will be a position here at UGA in perpetuity that's focused on turkeys.
Gotcha. Okay, very cool, man. So what led you down this path of biology, conservation? How'd you get to where you're at?
Yeah, I grew up as a suburban kid, and my dad was a hunter, but he worked really, really hard. And he was gone all week. And so I didn't get to see my dad except late at night when he'd come home, beat tired. But I could hunt with him on the weekends. And that's how I could bond with my dad. So I became a hunter basically to spend time with my dad. And through time, that became a real passion for the outdoors and for conservation of natural resources. And so that kind of led me into college, and the rest is history.
Gotcha, man. Very cool. Well, I commend guys that are highly educated in their field, highly educated on wildlife. I am on staff for Pope and Young, so I get to meet people that, talk about this type of stuff on a very high level. And I've kind of just fallen in love with listening to them talk. They're highly educated on the field, and we coined the term at our last convention, redneck nerd. And but people who are not just going out and harvesting animals, killing animals, and hunting for the fun of it, but that are highly educated on the species themselves. They're highly educated on why they do what they do. They're highly educated on, the habitat and the natural resources, and they can speak to these things so fluidly. And I find myself always leaving those conversations challenged, always leaving those conversations with, well, yeah, why do I do what I do? Like, is it just because it's what I was taught? Like, is it just because, this is what was handed down to me from my dad as a hunter? Or is there a real reason behind it? Is there a purpose in doing what I'm doing? Why do we kill the deer that we kill? Why do we kill the turkeys that we kill? Why do we, I did a video not too long ago on coon hunting, like, and as a kid, it just seemed like something fun to do. Like, it just seemed like, well, it gives me something to go out and shoot. But when you really understand the impact that a raccoon can have on your turkey populations, your pheasant populations, your quail populations, you realize, like, it's a necessity. You need to go out. And like, so many times we focus on coyote hunting and we focus on the big bad predators, and then we leave the coons in our trash cans to really take a toll on our birds. And so again, it's just like those things that you're challenged with that really make me appreciate the guys that are highly educated in their field and can challenge me to think differently on things. And so I appreciate guys like you, man. Way smarter than me. I'll tell you that. And I appreciate guys who will apply their intelligence to furthering my opportunities as a sportsman. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your dedication to the NWTF and to our turkey populations nationwide.
Yeah, for sure.
Which leads me into helping people better understand turkey habitat and dissecting turkey habitat. Why are turkeys where they are? And hopefully the point to this entire episode, my hopes is that when we leave this entire episode, we can go from we can understand a turkey habitat and stop chasing turkeys and predict turkeys, if that makes sense. And becoming more tuned into where a turkey's at, why they're using this property, where they're at in certain areas, at certain times of the year, different places like that. So to start, let's just kind of cover this big picture question. And when you evaluate habitat as a biologist, what are you looking for first?
Yeah. So if you think about a turkey, at their core is the ability to see. Wild turkeys are a bird that survive from being able to have vision. They detect danger primarily through their eyesight. And so when I first step onto a property, or I'm first trying to get a sense for, okay, what does this quote unquote look like from a turkey's perspective? I am looking at visibility. How open is the vegetative structure? Can birds navigate through it? Can they see through the forest that they're in? Are there open environments such as fields or areas that would allow birds to use the edges of those, kind of the interface between forest and open, because those vegetative communities are where turkeys thrive. And so I'm looking at, is it a forested landscape? Okay, yes. Well, can I see through the forest understory? Can I see danger approaching me if I was a bird that, whose head is slightly above your knee in height? And so that's number one. And then number two is I am looking to see if there are hardwoods present, mass producing hardwoods such as oaks, because turkeys are, at least the eastern subspecies, is inextricably linked to the availability of quality hardwood forest. And so those are the two things I'm right out of the box I'm trying to assess.
Now, and really what it comes down to, and I know this is the basic redneck terminology, like this is coming from a stupid redneck. But any species that you're going to assess, any species you're going to look at, they need four things: food, cover, water, and just space to thrive and live. So when you're assessing those things, I guess the big question for me is what I mean by pretty woods. No matter what species I'm talking about, if I see that ideal, pretty woods, and I'm like, dude, this just looks like where turkeys should be. Or, if you're on an elk hunt, it happens every hunt. You're like, man, it just looks like there should be elk here. It looks like there should be bears here. It looks like there should be deer here. Because it's just so pretty. So how do you kind of, I don't want to say split the difference, but how do you take off those goggles and differentiate between pretty woods and actual turkey habitat, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I think a lot of us, when we think of pretty just for ourselves, we think of wide open park-like forest. If you're a turkey, imagine open forest community with low growing succulent green vegetation on the ground. So, vegetation that's a few inches tall that dominates the forest, where it's going to be attractive to insects, which are an important part of turkey diets. There's going to be hard mass there during the fall, winter, and early spring. And so, like I was saying earlier, the visibility. So imagine pretty for a wild turkey being open, yet lots of lush vegetation on the ground.
Now, how do you also, going into into a turkey season, it's easy to look at the property as is, like it is right now. So how do you dissect a good habitat year round to help, really grow a turkey population versus what it just looks like in the spring?
Yeah, that's a good question. And turkeys are interesting in this regard because their requirements, their habitat requirements fundamentally change as the year progresses. So, for instance, during the fall and winter, you're going to think hardwood habitats, availability of hard mast. If you're in agricultural landscapes, waste grains, something that a bird can eat during the throes of winter. But as you start to get to spring, turkeys are going to transition. They're actually going to leave their winter range and they're going to move into a spring range. Sometimes that move is a very short distance. And as you get out west, sometimes that move could be 10 plus miles where they're literally going to abandon.
Really?
Yep. They're going to abandon their winter range and completely move to another part of the landscape where they're going to breed. And then if you think about it for each sex, females are then, instead of using open habitats where they can see, when they start to nest, they're going to go find thicker, shrubbier, brushier, grassier places where they can hide and incubate a nest. Whereas males during that period are going to continue to use open vegetative communities. Well, as soon as a hen hatches her clutch, she's going to take that brood and she's going to leave the nest and go to habitats that are once again open because those poults need to be able to move about, but she's going to have very dense cover nearby where they can hide. And so if you look at the calendar year for a turkey, what they use during winter is completely different than what they use during the spring.
Now, coming from a deer hunter, primarily a deer hunter, that's super interesting to me because I don't run cameras in the spring because I don't care about turkeys. I take that. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. I take that back. Again, I'm looking at it with new eyes. I'm looking at it with new eyes.
Man. New lens.
I'm going to start caring about turkeys. I haven't in the past. So looking at it from a deer hunter's perspective, when I'm running my cameras in the fall, there's properties where I've got literally 50 birds just coming across all the time. And then there's properties where I don't see any turkeys. So what you're telling me is like when I put my cameras out in the spring now, because I'm a turkey hunter now, if I put my cameras out in the spring, that could completely flip flop. Like the properties I never see birds on in the fall could have birds all over them and vice versa.
100%. Yeah, a very common scenario across much of the birds range is when I talk with landowners, it's I have a bunch of turkeys in the winter and then they leave. Or it's I don't see any turkeys on my property until March. And then suddenly they show up out of nowhere. And that's really common in the turkey world, unless you're a landowner that owns a lot of acreage, right? If you're dealing with, individual farms or relatively small properties, to your point, you could literally have turkeys today and not tomorrow.
Wow. Now, okay, so I want to take a step back because before I should have asked this very first. Tell me about a turkey's home range. Tell me about a turkey's, with a deer, it's a lot more, I should say, I think it's going to be a lot more simplistic, given that you just said turkeys can completely move. But walk me through a turkey's home range. Like how big will a turkey's home range actually be?
Yeah, it really depends on where you are in the, on the planet. But in a general sense, in the east and south, kind of the eastern subspecies, you're talking a bird that uses literally, like during the summer, they may only use 100 acres at a time, very small home ranges because they're kind of hunkered down. And then as they transition to fall and winter, they start to expand their home range. It's not uncommon at all to have birds use several thousand acres in a month during the fall and winter as they're traveling to find foraging resources. And then they may, like we were talking about, they may shift miles from that home range to a spring breeding range and then turn around and come back after the breeding season ends in the summer. So not only do you have a bird that has that shifts from one season to the next, but if you factor all of those shifts together, their entire annual home range is thousands of acres. And in some cases, particularly when you move out west, where you have birds like Merriam's subspecies that will essentially migrate from their winter to their breeding range, you may have a bird that's covering, tens of square miles in a year, which is pretty crazy.
I know we can't say always because there's anomalies. Yeah, that word.
Anomalies.
Yeah, that. I told you I'm a dumb redneck, man. So I know we can't say always, but do turkeys normally, like, so if they're in area A in the fall, they move to area B in the spring, do they normally go back to the same area A?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That's called fidelity. And they do have a very strong fidelity to both their wintering ranges and their spring breeding ranges. So when they leave their winter flocks to go to their breeding range, they tend to go back to the same location every year. Maybe not to the exact spot, but certainly the same farm, same property. Okay.
Now walk me through kind of, and this might not pertain to birds at all, but one thing that really blew my mind, again, I love talking to folks that are highly educated, and Matt Ross from the NDA years ago, we did an episode on the science of deer movement, and he talked about a deer, having its first life with mom and then completely relocating, like it's moving out from home, going to start its own life, do its own thing away from mom and dad. Do turkeys, A, I have that question. Do they do that at all? And then B, we talk about these excursions that deer go on during the rut, and you'll see deer that you've never seen before, and they're there for a couple days and then they're gone again. That's not their home range; it's a vacation spot. They're just out looking for tail. Do turkeys do any kind of excursions where they go out of their normal range looking for love?
Yeah, I'll start with the second question. So you don't see excursive type behavior in turkeys. You will see, toms that will kind of travel a lot within their established home range during the spring to try to find hens, but you don't see them just boogering out, like a whitetail will and just taking off. You also don't see in turkeys the phenomenon that's been well documented over the past decade or so in the whitetail world of bucks in particular using two different home ranges during the year. Yeah. I've been a part of a number of GPS collar studies with whitetails, and that's a very common behavior in the whitetail world. We don't see that with turkeys either. They tend to be restricted to their home ranges, and they use that range every year. So the former question about kind of dispersal, when they leave, like you're talking about a whitetail, they're born as a buck fawn, and then at some point between then and when they're a year and a half old, a lot of times they'll leave and go disperse to some other part of the world and set up a range there. So what turkeys do is the males are not really the dispersing sex in turkeys. It's the females. And so what we see with the females is kind of this scenario. Mom hatches you hang around with mom all summer and fall, both sexes. And then right about now, actually a few weeks ago, the jakes, the juvenile males, they go off on their own. They're hanging around nearby mom and other hens. But the juvenile females are in the winter flock with mom. And so that scenario, what you're seeing, for instance, if let's say in your area, you see a flock of 20 hens right now, within that 20 hens, there may be 10 adults and 10 juveniles. And those juveniles were hatched to some of those moms this summer. Well, what's going to happen is when those winter flocks disband in a few weeks, in the South anyway, and they go to their breeding range, those juveniles are that's how they disperse. So you may end up with a young hen that's hatched here in my part of Georgia on a property. And when she goes to breed, she's 3 properties down the road. And so what dispersal looks like in a deer is these bucks will go miles, right? They'll leave and go miles, but we don't see that for the most part in turkeys. Their dispersal is a much shorter distance, typically, right? Not, I mean, there are extraordinary examples. We had a bird from Nebraska that went over 80 miles into Colorado and never came back. But that's not
Really?
that. Yeah. But that's
that boy hopped on a semi truck and just took a ride.
She was weird. She actually left a study site and walked, I think, don't quote me on this, it was over 80 miles. I believe it was 86 miles that's straight line distance. So what she actually walked, if you look at her movement tracks, she had a GPS unit on, she walked over 100 miles to get where she was going. And
why? Like, is there any kind of explanation to that? Like, she had to have passed crazy good habitat,
Basically, what she looked like she was doing is she started walking off, and she got. Imagine, you get out there where you've got these rugged canyons. And a bird gets in one of these canyons in northwest Nebraska, and she starts walking.
Yeah,
and she follows it, and the next thing you know, she ends up in some agricultural landscapes. There's center pivot fields. And the habitat that she has available is the vegetation between the pivots, right? The circular fields. And so she navigates through those. And the next, for whatever reason, she just kept walking. And interestingly enough, she ended up nesting over 80 miles from where she was captured and left. Again, that's quite extraordinary in the turkey world, but it does happen.
Now, hey, don't get me wrong. I love the extremes. I love hearing those, and that's kind of what, Matt just blew my mind with some of those extraordinary, facts about hey, this isn't the norm, but we have tracked this in deer before. And I like hearing that, man, because again, it makes you think about things a little differently. Like, it makes you think about things, it helps me at least think about things from a turkey's perspective. So
think
going back to
walking 80 miles. I mean, think about that.
Think
about what it takes to, if you didn't know where the hell you were going and you just said, I think I'm just going to walk until I feel like stopping.
Like Forrest Gump. That's the Forrest Gump turkey.
Yeah, exactly.
And their legs are a lot shorter than mine. I'm a lot fatter than they are too, though. Now, so going back to the habitat, if I drop you in the middle of a property you've never seen before, you've never been to before, what is the kind of mixture? What's the ratio of diversity, hardwoods versus edge versus clear cuts versus, that's going to make you think like this property has good turkey potential?
Yeah. So turkeys are in particular going to thrive where forest meets open, right? So that looks different depending on where you live. So if you're in my part of the world where it's the densely forested Southeast, pine dominated forest, then I'm looking for large chunks of hardwood habitat with that pine component, with open fields, wildlife openings, food plots, something that's going to give birds that diversity of open to forest. As I go, north, and say, for instance, I get into the upper Midwest where the landscape becomes forested and agricultural kind of intermixed, then I'm looking for, okay, where are those intact hardwoods remaining? Because those landscapes are much more open and different than where I live. And then even as I'm going out west, you get into Nebraska, the Dakotas. Now you're flipping the script entirely. Now okay, where is tree cover, right? Where is their forest habitat at all?
Yeah.
Because that's where this bird is going to be living. And most of that is linked primarily to hardwoods that they're going to use for food. But as you go out west, where turkeys are relying more on agricultural grains, you start to see that the forest that's the only roosting cover they have. And turkeys are very different than many game birds because they sleep above ground. And the reason they do that is because they have very poor night vision and are susceptible to being eaten by things on the ground if they were to stay on the ground. So you have a 20-pound bird that sleeps in a tree. And so as you get into some parts of our world, the limiting factor is literally enough trees for them to roost in.
Now, you've talked a lot about agricultural. And for me, it's easy to understand from a deer hunter's perspective, but from a turkey hunting perspective, what does changes to the agriculture do to a turkey? In other words, if I've got a property and they have always planted X, Y, and Z, and then all of a sudden they start planting something completely different. Mm-hmm. What does that do to a turkey? Do they up and move and find better crops, or do they? What does that do to a turkey? Mm-hmm. Depending on what the hunter plant, what the farmer plants.
Yeah. So what you see with turkeys is, again, they're not going to just pick up and leave, right? They're going to stay within their range, but what they'll do is expand their range. And so imagine a scenario where for decades, turkeys have been coming to this part of the world that has farming practices being conducted. And suddenly two things happen. One, those farming practices become more efficient and therefore are leaving less waste grain on mm-hmm. the landscape. Okay, well, that reduces forage availability. And or two, to your point, maybe the agricultural practices themselves have changed, wherein certain crops are either no longer grown or are grown in less abundance than they were previously. That causes turkeys to have to expand how much area they cover. And so what that causes is an energetic issue. So turkeys are, particularly this year, if you kind of look at the weather we've had in much of North America, this winter has been really tough for a lot of wildlife species, and including turkeys, even in areas where they're not historically used to dealing with, incredible snow and ice and cold. And so turkeys have to balance that, just like deer do, where, okay, I really need to get some energy here, but I don't want to burn energy. So they're in this balance where they're trying not to burn energy and kind of hunker down. And so farming practices, when you get in some of the really tough places that turkeys live, farming practices are really important to turkeys because those waste grains are critical to getting them through the winter and into the spring.
That makes sense. And then as opposed to food, what about the changes in wet years versus dry years? Properties that normally hold water, but a drought has caused them not to have any water, or vice versa. Properties that never have water now have standing water on them, or a dry creek that normally is dry now has water. How does that affect the turkey's habitat and the way they move?
Yeah, that becomes much more of an issue as you kind of get west of the Mississippi River. We don't see a lot, even during fairly tough droughts in the east. Turkeys will still have availability of some water sources, and they do get a lot of their water from insects during tough times. But as you get out into, say, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and even farther west, and in particular, as you go south of the border into the Gould subspecies range, where it's incredibly dry, years of prolonged drought are really problematic for mm-hmm. those turkey populations. And what you see is that their productivity or their reproductive output is much, much less during drought years, to the point of it can be almost zero, meaning you'll see almost no production at all, because they literally are in a "I'll wait until next year" strategy. And so what you see with turkeys, as you go to your question about these dry years, as you go out west, you literally see boom and bust cycles with turkeys, where in super dry years, it's a bust, and then you get a really super, a good wet winter that produces lush vegetation in the spring, and boom, you'll see turkeys literally like, almost like they pop up out of the ground. They are incredibly productive. On the flip side, wet is a problem across the turkey's range if it occurs at the wrong time. And the wrong time would be right as nests are starting to hatch in the spring. If you get prolonged days of rain, and in particular rain coupled with cool temperatures, that is a death sentence for newly hatched poults, because they get wet and they can't thermoregulate. So that, wet at the wrong time is bad.
Gotcha. Now, I do want to move on because I've got a ton of questions I want to try and cover. Nesting habitat. What does ideal nesting habitat look like? And how often do hunters misunderstand good nesting habitat?
Yes. So I think a lot of us turkey hunters have a vision in our head that it's like this really thick, dense, stuff that she can hide in. But in reality, what we see is turkeys will nest in a lot of different looking places, and thicker is not always better. In fact, if you really want to think about, if you look at all the nest sites, the thousands of nest sites that we visited through our field research, the only common denominator is there's just enough cover for her to squat down and hide. And so that may only literally be 8 or 10 inches. I mean, it doesn't have to be a lot. In reality, if you look at how turkeys come and go from their nest, they have to be able to walk, right? So there is a point where too thick is bad. So imagine, to try to generalize it for the listener, is knee height vegetation and below, turkeys can pretty much make it work in any vegetative community that's about knee high, ish.
Gotcha. Now, what about nest preparations and its relationship to the habitat structure that we're talking about?
Well, that's interesting, because what we see with turkeys is they do not visit their nest by and large until the day they lay the first egg.
Really?
Yeah. So this idea that they're going out and looking around and picking the best spot and doing something there, that's not happening. What they're doing instead is, the day that their body tells them they need to lay an egg, that's the day that they start looking for a spot that they think they can make it work. And that kind of challenges the idea that, they're selecting, if you will, the best spot. That doesn't really appear to be the case.
That is super interesting to me. I would not have guessed that. And maybe it's common knowledge to most turkey hunters. But looking at it again from somebody who doesn't have a lot of turkey experiences, that kind of surprises me.
Yeah. And it really speaks to the need to have a broad distribution of nesting cover, right? Because if she's not going to all these different patches and picking the best spot, then we need a broad distribution of nesting cover across the landscape.
Yeah.
Because the way she's selecting the nest is much more specific to that first day that she needs to lay. So she needs to have a wide array of nesting cover available to her.
So this might be a stupid question, but if a property lacks nesting cover, how far will the bird travel to find it?
So that's where you're going to get into some of these issues with birds walking, like taking off. What we see with turkeys is when they leave their winter range and they go to a spot to breed, once they're bred, they're going to move off a fairly short distance from that area to nest. So I don't generally see nesting cover as being limited. It might be limited on a particular property, but then in the grand scheme of the neighborhood that the bird's using, we don't typically see a lack of nesting cover being an issue.
So if there are birds, then there is nesting cover inside of their home range.
Yeah, if they're coming back to the same spot to breed, and you happen to own a property where every year turkeys are coming to breed at your property, then there's nesting cover nearby. It's just where where is it?
Right. All right. Let's tackle brood habitat and what makes good brood habitat different from good nesting habitat.
Yep, good question. So, nesting habitat is I need to hide in plain sight, right? I need to be able to hunker down and protect myself from the eyes of predators. I also need the vegetation to be dense enough or diverse enough in height to where when air flows across it, that the vegetation disrupts the air, because that compromises the ability for predators to smell me. Well, then when I hatch my poults, all of that changes. Now I need to take them to somewhere that a bird that's a few inches tall can move around. And to do that, they need some bare ground, literally bare soil, and they need cover. And so I tell people this: if you want to evaluate brood habitat, the first thing you need to do is lay down on your stomach. And if you lay down on your stomach and you look in front of you, that's the vision. That's how the world looks to a 2-day-old poult.
Mm-hmm.
Then you want to roll over on your back. And when you roll over on your back, if you can look around you in your vision and see something that you could duck under to hide, that's your second box to check. Then what you want to do is hop up on your knees and look around you. And if you can see over and through the vegetation sitting on your knees, so can the hen. And if you can check those 3 boxes, you're probably standing in a spot that's at least decent brood habitat. And what I find in my travels is, with very few exceptions, that is the limiting habitat type or habitat on the landscape is brood cover.
So, I mean, and you put it very simply, which I enjoy, very practical, but to just kind of sum that up, you want almost bare ground, almost no, undercover or undergrowth, but then really thick overcover above them.
Yeah. Imagine a scenario where you've got some bare ground and you have grasses and forbs, and some of the stuff is 6 or 8 inches tall. Some of it is 2 feet tall. It's very diverse. And there's some bare ground there where poults can move around. But as soon as mom tells them you need to stop and hide, when she vocalizes to them to stop, they can duck under something. And that's what they need the first few weeks of their life. And then once they get bigger, they can start using areas that mom, that's more like an adult, where an adult would use. But those first few weeks, yes, they need some open bare ground.
Is there a particular area that you would say usually this offers good brood, like like river bottoms or anything like that, where you would say this is a good place? These types of areas, majority of the time, are offering better brood areas.
Yeah, it really depends on where you are, but I'll give you some scenarios. So, like here in the deep South, imagine hardwood habitats with juxtaposed or beside some open habitats. Maybe it's a stand that was prescribed burned during the spring. Maybe it's a food plot that was planted for deer that is now, but still open. As you move into, as you go out west or even upper Midwest, that will change a little bit. You may see turkeys that are brooding along agricultural, the edges of agricultural fields and into adjacent woodlots. When you get out into the grasslands and prairies, you may see that a river bottom with some grassland right beside it, right? So if you've traveled out west, you can envision, if you close your eyes, you can kind of think about a river
Mhm.
bottom that's got some grassland beside it.
Yeah.
That would be brooding cover. So it really just depends on where you are on the landscape.
So, what can a hunter, if a hunter is on a property in the summer, what should they look for that would predict good turkeys in 2 to 3 years, next year, 2 years, 3 years? What should they be looking for to say like this could produce turkeys?
So summer is interesting because what turkeys do in the summer is they kind of hunker down like we do. When it gets really hot, they don't move much. And so in the summer, I'm looking for riparian areas, river, streams, water, um, cooler, low elevation places that the temperature is lower in. Because what you see with turkeys is they can deal with incredible cold, but incredible hot is challenging because they're fully feathered and they have to dissipate heat from their head and other, they'll fan their wings and they'll do things that allow them to dissipate heat. So in the dead of summer, they're getting in the shade in lower elevation areas where it's cooler. So if I'm on a property in the summer and it's, dead summer and it's super hot, I'm going low to areas where the temperature is going to be even 4 or 5 degrees cooler.
So, and this might be I don't know if this is a good way to ask this question, but we want to be hunting in the spring. That's when we want to go out and kill the birds. So we need to already have the properties, that we're going to hunt on before that. So what is the best time of year to look at future hunting spots, if that makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go out in the spring and start looking for birds and then start asking permission. I want to have those spots lined up. Or I want to know what, public ground area I'm going to. So what is the best time of year to look and say, I bet in the spring this will have birds here?
Yeah, I would want to find those winter flocks. Try to find those winter flocks, understanding that's going to pretty much tell you how many birds are in the neighborhood, right? So during the winter, they're all going to be flocked together. So all of your hens are going to be flocked together. All of your jakes are going to be flocked together, and all of your toms are going to be together. But they're not going to be all in the same group. So I'm going and looking for large winter flocks because that's going to tell me two things. One, within a few miles of this spot where I'm seeing this large flock of hens, that they're going to nest they're going to breed within a few miles of where I'm at right now. And so then I'm starting to branch out and say, okay, do I have access to any of these properties? And if so, do they offer breeding habitat? Do they have hardwoods? Do they have open areas where birds can strut and display? Do they have, in particular, if you're thinking hardwoods, larger hardwoods that would be roost locations? What we see with turkeys is they use the same roost generation after generation. And so if you get any intel that, hey, I've been hearing turkeys on this property for 30 years, well, that's a prime spot, right? That they've been going back to that location every year. So I start with the winter flocks, and sometimes you're just not going to be able to see winter flocks. Like you get where I live, it's very, very, it's densely forested here. And so we don't see a lot of flocks going out in the fields. So it's almost like they don't even exist. And then suddenly you start seeing birds in the spring. So it really depends on where you are. But like, friend, I'll give you an example. I just was in December, I was out west and in an area that I hunt every spring, and I've never been there in the winter. And so I went to driving around looking, and sure enough, I found a huge winter flock of birds on an adjacent farm to where I hunt. Now I know, okay, well, they spend the winter right over there. Every spring when I'm out there, this is what I see, but I saw a completely different picture in December. And it really offered me some insight, gave me some insight as to, okay, they're on this property in the winter and they're traveling to the property that some of them are traveling to the property I hunt in the spring. How did they get there? What's the route that they would take logically to get from that winter flock to that breeding area? Because if I show up and they're not there yet, which has happened several times, where could they be? Well, they're probably in between. And so I need to go scout some of these farms that are in between where I usually hunt to see if I can intercept those birds.
That makes a lot of sense. And you just mentioned roosting. So let's dive into roosting habitat. What makes a good roosting tree?
Lots of lateral branching, right? So branches that a bird can walk around on. Think larger hardwoods that are going to give the bird the ability to get well above the ground and walk around in the tree. You'll see birds commonly hop from one limb to another limb while they're on the roost, both when they fly up and when they fly down. So those are two things. Interesting question, because I have a student that's really digging into roosting habitat now. She's visiting these roosts that toms have used for generations across our study sites and trying to figure out what's different at these sites than other places. But it looks like in many places, roosts are going to be about mid slope. So if you've got some topography, they're going to be about mid slope.
Why is that?
I think it's because, this is my speculation, but I think it's because if you think about it from their perspective, they can either fly to the bottom or they can fly up to the top. If you're in the middle of the slope, you can sail out either high or low. I think that's part of the strategy.
That makes sense.
When you go to certain places like the Gould's subspecies, and we actually see this with some of our Easterns as well, aspect is important. So like every Gould's roost that you find is on a north-facing slope. And that's because, those slopes are cooler, and they offer vegetation that's more succulent. They're not as hot. The vegetation is more lush and succulent on north slopes. So you tend to see better tree cover on north slopes than south slopes. So there's a lot that goes into roost that we don't understand, and that's one reason I have this graduate student digging deeply into that.
Do turkeys prefer any sort of species of tree, or is it just strictly cover and strictly, how? Well, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Do they look at? I mean, do they like any sort of certain species over another, or?
Mm-hmm. Yep, they do. When you get into particularly the Midwest, cottonwoods are a critical roost tree, and it's because cottonwoods are large and they produce those branches, those lateral branches that turkeys select. When you get into really densely forested places like where I live, where you have a lot of pine, you typically are going to see birds roosting in hardwoods that's beside those pine stands. And so the species of tree is less relevant based on what we understand thus far than the structure of the tree. But as you know, I mean, you're a hunter, there's certain types of trees tend to have different structure than others, right? And so, big sprawling live oaks in the South have the branching patterns that would be attractive for a roost. But a different tree might produce that same branching pattern in Michigan, if you will.
Does the diameter of the tree matter at all?
Yeah, bigger's better, for sure. Yeah. I'm not going to say that turkeys will not roost in some weird trees sometimes. I've seen them roost in some trees that were much smaller than I would have thought, but typically larger hardwoods are going to be selected.
Now, and I don't know how to word this. How many different roosts will a turkey have? Or do they always go back to the same roost? Do they have two or three? I mean, is it different every time?
Yep. That changes from east to west. If you're in the eastern United States, you see that they have a number of roosts throughout their home range. but they might use 3 of them most often. They may have a dozen that they use in a year, but they may use the same 3 or 4 most of the time. As you go farther and farther west, when you get into the Rio Grande subspecies range and the Merriams and the Goulds, those birds will often come back to the exact same tree every night. And so it differs as you go about where the bird lives.
Right. So if I put a bird to bed on a Monday night, but I can't hunt till Wednesday, how does that, you know what I mean? Like, I know that bird's roosting there Monday night. I'm coming out to hunt Wednesday or Thursday morning. How far could that bird be from the roost? Would it be same roost, different roost? Like, how does that, help?
Yep. Again, if you're out west, it's probably he's going to be there again. If you're in the east, 3 scenarios could happen. He's there and you hear him Wednesday morning and all's good. He's gone, but another tom is roosted there. And the bird you're hearing on Wednesday morning is not the bird that was there Monday morning or Monday night. Or nobody can be there. And so we see situations where one tom will leave a roost and travel to a different spot and roost somewhere else that night. And another tom comes in and roosts in the same spot where he was the previous night. We see that commonly. And so what that tells you is, as a hunter, sometimes you think you're hearing the same turkey 2 days in a row, but you're hearing 2 different turkeys that roosted in the same spot.
Gotcha. All right. Now let's get into the, to the nitty gritty, if you will. How does hunting pressure, the amount of hunting pressure on a property, interact with the quality of the habitat? The better the habitat, the more hunting pressure is going to be. You know what I mean? I mean, more hunters are going to go there. So how does that interact with each other? How do those two collide as far as how good the hunting will actually be?
Yeah, so we see really clearly, and we've published a lot of this work, hunting pressure dramatically alters how turkeys behave. When you get in situations where hunting pressure gets really high, they gobble much less. They tend to gobble only in the tree. Some birds will move to different parts of their home range in response to heavy pressure. Some toms will just hunker down and deal with the pressure. So you do see the bird does respond to heavy pressure by changing how they behave. So there would be an interaction between, man, I've got great turkeys. I got turkeys running everywhere on this property. If you hunt the hell out of it, the quality of hunting through time is going to deteriorate.
Now, are pressured birds selecting habitat differently, or are they acting differently inside of their selected habitat?
Both. It's both of those. Yeah, we see a lot of individual variation in how a tom will respond to pressure. It appears that some toms take a really risky approach where they use open areas, they move a lot, they move fast, and that's how they deal with pressure. And some take the reverse. They slow down, they move very methodically. They may go to parts of their range where there's very little or no pressure and stay there. We've seen examples where turkeys will leave heavily pressured public lands, travel to nearby private lands where no hunting is occurring, and stay there for the rest of the season, and then return to the public lands after the season closes. We see that commonly as well.
Now, as far as trying to relieve some of the hunting pressure, what are some of the management practices, logging or fires, or what are some of the management practices that a hunter could do to best benefit the turkeys?
Yeah, I mean, generally any type of disturbance that's going to disturb the vegetative community. The least effective, obviously, is mowing. I mean, mowing doesn't really do anything and can create problems in and of itself. But disking, fire, things that are going to stimulate understory vegetation or vegetation at the ground level, those are things that are going to benefit turkeys. As a hunter, I'll tell you one thing that just from a hunting practice standpoint that I try to do is not hunt when conditions are bad. Like if I have to go on a day when the conditions are really, really bad, then I will. But if I can sit out and just not push things when the chances of me being successful are really, really low, I try to do that because that in and of itself will reduce pressure.
Take a step back. What are the good? We haven't even covered that. What are the good conditions for hunting? What are you looking at to say, dude, the turkeys, I'm going to kill a bird today? Yeah,
I mean, from my perspective, I don't hunt turkeys in the rain. I can't stand it. I don't want to kill a bird when they're wet because they don't look like wild turkeys when they're wet. They that the iridescence and the splendor of their feathers is gone, and I like to spend a lot of time with the bird after I harvest it and just admiring it, and I can't do that when it's wet, so I don't hunt in the rain. But my own research has shown that when you get weather fronts that pass, the next 2 days where barometric pressure is higher than it was the previous day, right? So imagine a scenario where a front has passed. You got a couple of days where each day the weather gets better and better and better. You're going to hear more gobbling on those days. And so those are the days that I want to be afield myself because I want to hear birds gobble first and foremost. And if I can do that, then I'm happy. So the other thing is, depending on the time of the season, if it's early in the season, those warmer, sunnier days with low winds, those are going to be, better quality days. And it might be the reverse as you get later into the season and you get these really warm temperatures, particularly in the South. Those cooler mornings, those are the mornings that pique my interest. It's like, oh man, we got a little cool front coming, and it just dropped the temperature 10 degrees, and so some of that may just be it's more comfortable for us,
Yeah. So I know you say you don't like hunting in the rain, and again, this is coming from a non-turkey hunter, but 2 times in 1 year, it was like the beginnings of a terrible thunderstorm. I mean, you are here, the lightning's cracking, shaking the car. I mean, it's starting to rain. Mm-hmm. And 2 different times in 1 year, I saw birds during those times. Like it's starting to pour rain, thunder's cracking. I mean, it is scary, mm-hmm. And I look over and there's a bird running up the tree line. It's like, okay, do turkeys like this? Like, do they move in this, or why would that be the case?
So what they'll usually do in really, really strong weather events like that is they kind of just hunker down. After rain and even during lighter rain events, they usually are going to move into open areas where they can dry off. And if you think about it from a turkey's perspective, if you're in the forest and the water's dripping and falling off the branches and leaves, it's noisy. You can't hear very well. You can't see very well. The wind's blowing and there's water everywhere. If you go out in the open, you can dry off and you can see and hear better. So any experienced turkey hunter will know if I hear a thunderstorm in the distance, I'm not leaving until it gets close to raining, because they will gobble their brains out to thunder. So if you have birds in the spring and you've ever had a thunderstorm approach, you know that every clap of thunder, they just can't stand it. They're going to gobble. And so that will help me keep tabs on birds as storms are approaching.
Okay. So then it makes sense. I mean, because like I said, both times the storms were starting, like mm-hmm. It was the start of a storm. So, or there was a pause break in the storm. And so that does make perfect sense that you would see more birds coming out to dry off. So they're coming out and you can see them, as you're driving down the road, you can see them out in the field because they're trying to dry off between the dumps of rain. So that does actually make perfect sense and helps me kind of wrap my mind around it. I interrupted you on the turkey practices, best management practices. What can a hunter do? Again, going back to if they really want to benefit their turkey populations, what are the best management practices to increase their habitat?
I'd say just try to identify any acreage that you can positively impact. And so if you're a hunter, like if you're like me, I don't own property, right? So I try to benefit turkey habitat by influencing the behavior of others. In your case, maybe you don't own property, but you have friends that own property. Can you take what we know about turkey habitat and encourage them to impact their property in a way that's going to benefit turkeys? So I typically tell hunters, if it's 1 acre, 100 acres, 1,000 acres, whatever it is, if you can try to positively impact vegetative communities or habitat on those acreages, then do it. And if we all did that, if we all identified the acreage that we could impact in some way, then we would make a dent in it for sure.
So as far as decline in turkey populations, how much is that tied to habitat? How much when you look at, man, we're having really bad turkey populations. How much of that is tied to habitat versus, you mentioned earlier, terrible winters, big snowstorms, big ice storms. How much of the decrease in turkey population is tied to changes in habitat?
A lot of it. Yeah, a lot of it. So these catastrophic one-time events, those are impactful in a particular year, but the landscape and the habitat that this bird exists in is something that impacts the population every year. And so if you look across the wild turkey's range, things that have happened over the last, say, 20 or 30 years, such as loss of habitat, such as changes in farming practices that leave less waste grain, or that can farm larger field sizes, reductions in fence row vegetation, increased use of herbicides and chemicals that are going to reduce the complexity of vegetative communities, a lack of prescribed fire because of liability and public pressure issues. All of that is impacting turkeys at broad scales. And so I don't think any informed person would try to argue that habitat isn't the most impactful thing to a turkey. It's just that it differs from one spot to the next, like we've talked about.
Right. Now, before we get into my next question, do not forget, right now, we have a giveaway for a free guided turkey hunt here in Kansas with my good friends at Skeen Outfitters. We're also going to give you $300 worth of brand new Blocker outdoor gear. You get to shop on the website. If you need some new pants and a jacket, new face mask, new vest, new whatever, you get to shop on the Blocker Outdoors website and get you $300 worth of new gear. And we're going to throw in the new Dirty Bird broadheads from G5. So make sure and go enter to win that. All you've got to do is make sure you are subscribed to The Typical Sportsman on either YouTube or Spotify. Go subscribe to the podcast on one of those two platforms, and we're going to give away a free guided turkey hunt here in Kansas with one of the best to do it, Mr. Wade Skeen at Skeen Outfitters. So don't miss that opportunity. Now, what is some of your practical advice for hunters? So if they're looking at new ground, if they're hunting new ground, hunting new areas, what habitat features should be prioritized over others?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to kind of where we started. If I have intact hardwoods on my property that are producing hard mast in the winter, oaks in particular, I'm going to seek ways to conserve those forests, understanding that the management can sometimes be necessary. So, for instance, you have closed canopy hardwoods no understory vegetation, then I may consider doing timber stand improvements within those forests to open up some understory vegetation and also to reduce competition on some of the high producing oaks. So in other words,
Yeah.
identifying some of these oaks that are the big producers and removing some trees from around them to free up those resources. That's number one. Number two, if I can figure out where birds are roosting, if they're on my property, I'm going to figure out where they're roosting, and I'm going to do everything in my power to conserve those locations. Because what we see is that when you go into a roost location that's been used for generations and you clear cut it or change it in some way, if the bird abandons it, they're not coming back to it. So I'm really trying to prioritize those roost locations and make sure that I conserve those. And then the other thing that I really focus on, if you're lucky enough to have broods, right? So wherever you live, if you're lucky enough to have access to a property where you're seeing broods in the summer, then you're doing something right. So what I'm going to then try to do is even further enhance brood habitat on that property, because we tend to see, like with roost, these hens will take these broods back to the same locations year after year. And so I'm going to then try to prioritize, management actions such as prescribed fire or rotational disking or whatever it is, to try to enhance that location, understanding that it's important to reproductive output.
So what you mean to tell me is the couple times that I've been like driving through one of my deer properties and I'm like, oh, that's cool, man. Cute little turkeys running around, little, 2-day old. That's actually a really good thing. Like,
that's a great
I need
thing.
to further that.
Yes. You need to figure out what resources they're using and do something to keep that resource available, whether it's they were out along the edge of a riparian hardwood area that had some crops that were in it, and now there's some bare ground available, and that's where they were. Or they were hanging around the edge of this shrub where shrubs were meeting grassland. Well, they were doing that because they had cover and they have food. Well, I'm going to try to prevent that shrub growth from getting too tall or to becoming tree cover. And so if you see broods in areas, try to figure out, going back to what we've talked about before, like, why are they there? And if you can kind of put your finger on why they're there, try to keep that, the why available to them in that location.
Man, I feel like you have given the listener a ton of valuable information. And I feel like really anybody can benefit from this. Anybody can learn how to be a better turkey hunter, how to better understand turkey habitat, how to better improve their turkey habitat. So that leads us to our last and final segment, which is our rapid fire questions presented by Tito Knives. So I'm going to throw these out to you fast, hard, and heavy, mainly about turkey hunting. What is your favorite state to turkey hunt?
Oh, South Dakota.
Least favorite state to turkey hunt?
Louisiana. Sorry, Louisiana guys.
Favorite camo pattern of all time?
Mossy Oak Bottomlands.
Oh, yes, it is the best. Speaking of that, guys, don't forget, I just dropped all the new Typical Sportsman gear on the website that features the Bottomland. Everything's better in Bottomland, even the Typical Sportsman brand. So go check out all that. What's your favorite snack in the turkey woods?
Venison jerky.
What is your favorite call of all time?
A Woodhaven glass call.
What is your go-to turkey recipe?
Everybody's going to have to say this: fried turkey nuggets.
Biggest turkey hunting myth?
Biggest turkey hunting myth. Gosh, there are so many. I think the one that we've already covered, that if you hear a turkey in the same spot 2 days in a row, that it's the same turkey.
What is the thing that most hunters overlook when it comes to being a better turkey hunter?
Slowing down.
What is, if you could hunt with anybody tomorrow, dead or alive? Not tomorrow, turkey season's closed. Opening day of turkey season, you get to go hunting with anybody, dead or alive. Who would it be?
If it was somebody that deceased, it would be probably be Lovett Williams, who was a famous researcher from Florida. I never got to meet Lovett, which is something that I regret. Gosh, alive, there are so many. Probably one of my favorite guys to hunt with is Billy Yargis.
Oh man, I've got to meet him once. Dude is very, very interesting. How many, just so people know, he's got like what, 120 turkey slams? Something like that?
Oh, no, you're thinking someone else. So Billy, Billy is one of the most accomplished callers that I've ever been around. And he's
in Florida, right? He lives in Florida.
No, Billy lives in Missouri.
Who am I thinking of that has killed like 120 turkey slams? Thought it was Billy.
Probably Jeff Buds.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to.
No, Billy is he's just a wonderful man. He's so fun to hunt with, and he's such an accomplished caller, and he's so selfless and self-deprecating. He's just a lot of fun to be around, and he's so gifted that it's just cool to watch him and listen to him.
Yeah. Any turkey hunt tomorrow, any state, any subspecies, money is no object, time off work, no object. Where are you going turkey hunting?
Mexico to hunt goulds. Yeah. It's addictive. If you're a turkey hunter and you haven't been to Mexico, you need to go once. It's unbelievable to see turkeys thrive in that environment.
Is it pretty expensive to go down and shoot them?
It's really not. No, if you find a quality outfitter, you can go to Mexico for which you can hunt an Osceola. And you really need to see it. If you're a serious turkey hunter, you need to go to the Sierra Madres and hunt turkeys at 7,000 or 8,000 feet and see a bird that's that beautiful thrive in such a rugged environment. It's intoxicating. It's like if you're a big game hunter and you hear about the romance of going to Africa. I decided to go to Africa one time, and I'd go every year if I could. I haven't been in years, but it's just intoxicating, and that's the way the Sierra Madres are for turkeys.
And to end it up, what is your single most important tip for the hunter to keep in mind this spring?
Soak up every minute that you're afield, because the seasons go by so fast. I try to tell people, soak up every minute. And if you need to leave in 30 minutes, try to sit another hour, because time afield is never time that's wasted.
Absolutely. Guys, if you like to build arrows or work on your bows at home, you have to know about a little website called papertuner.com. I have a little studio here, a little space here where I work on all my bows, and big paper tuners just used to take up all the space. You couldn't hang them anywhere nice and neat. They took up a lot of floor space. And then I come across papertuner.com. What you get from papertuner.com is an all-in-one solution to paper tune your bows. They come with all the magnetic strings, all the clips you need. You can hang it up in a matter of seconds, take it down in a matter of seconds, hang it on the wall. It is a phenomenal way to paper tune your bows. However, they also have incredible arrow spinners. They have arrow stands. If you don't have a place to hang your paper tuner, they even make tripod mounts so you can mount it on just a regular old tripod. Guys, papertuner.com is a phenomenal solution for little shops that just don't have a lot of space for a big old paper tuner. Guys, go check them out, papertuner.com. I promise you'll be glad you did. Mike, man, I appreciate you coming on. Again, I feel like you have given every listener something of value, and that is that is important to me, that they tune into the show and give us an hour of their time and they leave better than they came. So I appreciate you coming on, man, and investing into turkey hunters and helping us become better turkey hunters and better understand our turkey habitat and how we can improve on it. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Everyone have a fantastic week and keep the dusty side up.